Welcome to Lesson 9 in the WPF with MVVM add-on course. In this lesson, we're going to finish the create tournament form. In our last lesson, we wired up the properties but left the methods blank. Now we're going to wire up those methods and see this form in action. Let's get started. So here's our create tournament view, just where we left it. And we have in the behind the scenes all of our methods to fill in. The first thing I want to tackle is this select teams dropdown. Let's actually bind this list so we see something working when we launch this form. So the way I do that is first I want to find out what this select team dropdown is populated by in our win form. Right here we have our dropdown. So let's go to our code behind for this and look at how you populate the teams. Right here. globalconfig.connection.get team_all. I'll copy that. Then I'll come to and that will translate that list into a bindable collection. And do my control dot for my using statement. And there we go. That one little change should mean the difference between nothing in the list and something in the list. And there we go. There's our list of teams. Now before we go any further, I want to tackle this width. Right now it starts off pretty small, kind of like this. I'll make this a lot bigger so I can actually see it when I first start up. So let's go over to our shell real quick. Our shell view. And up here we have height and width. Width right now is 600. Let's make that a more respectable 1200. Because a normal monitor is 1920 pixels wide. 1200 is only about 2/3 of that. And the height, let's make that something more like 700. Let's test that out just to make our lives a little easier for now. We can kind of refine this as we get closer to the end. But here you can see we actually have a more usable layout right now. Now it's still, again, crunched up here. Don't worry about that. That's for later when we make this a little bit prettier. But for right now, this seems to work pretty well. Okay. So now we have our list, but notice when I select something, the add team does not change to be enabled. So let's change that so it enables and then also wire up the add team button. So when I click the add team, it adds to the list. We can do that by going back to our view model and scrolling down here to can add team. Now, if you remember from the team form, this wasn't a method; it was actually a property. We had to do the notify a property change for the can add team, and that's our problem here too. Is this is not being flagged that it needs to be I need to say, where is it that the can add team needs to be updated? And so that's whenever the selected team to add has been changed. Selected team to add. We have notify a property change for selected team to add, but now let's say notify a property change for can add team. Now, since we're here, we should also look at the other items like selected team to remove should also get a notify a property change, not for can add team, but can remove team. And then finally, we'll look back here at our, and it's switched again. I don't know why it's doing that, but it's annoying. In our combo box, we have available teams and selected team to add. And then down here, we have selected teams. So available teams and selected teams. So back over here, we want to add first. So selected teams dot add, and it is the selected team to add. That's the team we're adding. And then we're going to take it away from available teams like that. So we're adding it to the list down here, and we're removing it from this list. Now that has an added benefit that when it gets removed from this list, it's no longer selected because there's nothing to select. That item is no longer there. Therefore, the add team button should gray back out because there's nothing selected here, which is what you want. Now let's run this. Make sure it actually runs. Select the team, add the team, and it says, nope, selected team to add has a null reference. Well, selected team is null. Available teams is not null, but selected teams is null. Why is that? Well, let's come back up here and look at our initialization list. For available teams, we create a new bindable collection and add that whole list in to the available teams. That initialized and filled the available teams list right at once. For selected teams, we don't have that. So we should start with a new bindable collection that's empty. And the same thing for selected prizes. This is where that repetition comes in handy, is because since we know we did it up here, we need to do up here, we know we need to do it down here because these are both selected lists. Therefore, they're kind of the same. So you treat them the same if possible. So let's run this again. Wait for it. Select the team, add the team, gets added down here, gets removed up here, and this button gets grayed out. And there we go. So now we have our list operating as we want it to. Remove team does highlight like it should, but the button isn't actually wired up. So let's go ahead and wire that button up. So let's come down to the remove button. Let's actually shrink down these that we don't need to have open right now. We've added the team, and that works. Remove team. So remove team is going to do just the opposite of the add team. I'll actually expand that back up. So now we need to say available teams.add select one, remove it, it's back in the list. So now I can continue to do this as long as we want, and it should all work. And as we remove, they pop back up in the list. One more, there we go. So add and remove for team is now working. Next, let's tackle the create team button. We'll start by going to that button and looking at what needs to happen when we click it. And it's flipped again. Imagine that. All right, so let's shrink it down a little bit. When we click this create team button, what we want to have happen is we want a whole section to be replaced with a form for creating a team. Now we have here selected team is visible and add team is visible. Now remember, the difference is selected team is visible says that this stack panel right here will be visible if we're just selecting teams from the drop down. But whenever you click the create team button, this should get hidden and this should become visible, and this will be the active add team view. Now, the one thing I realized is we didn't actually create the Boolean properties for selected team is visible, add team is visible, which of course means we also didn't do the selected prize is visible or the add prize is visible. We missed those. So let's go back and do these, where we'll actually create these, and then we can start turning them off and on depending on our needs. So I'll start with selected team is visible. Let's come up underneath my is visible. And then, like before, I will take my private backing field and move it up right there. And then I'll also put my notify of property change. There we go. Now I'll do this a couple more times. Gonna come and actually copy and paste these. So add team is visible. Add my notify. And I'll move that backing field up. I'll come back over here and get the next set, which we selected prizes is visible. Add my notify. Collapse it down. Move the private backing field up. And it should be my last one. Add prizes. Add prize is visible. Add my notify here. Collapse it down. Move the backing field up. And that should be all the properties we need. Now, let's start off by initializing these 4 values. Selected teams is visible, or selected teams is visible. That'd be true. That's our drop down with the teams to select. The add new team by default starts off at false. Same thing for prizes. The selected is true and the add is false. So now we've done all of that, we can come down here to create team and say the selected team is visible equals false, and add team is visible equals true. So that will shut down one section and make visible another. In this case, it's going to make visible the section that has just the content control called active add team view. Next, we're going to need to populate active add team view. This used to be active item. We had just one control on a page. We had active item. Well, now we have active add team view and active add prize view. So before we have the true and the false sets where we change those, I'm going to have this add, I want to add prize is visible and copy it, I guess. Let's go back in here and copy it. Active add team view. That's what I want. There we go. Equals new, and I need to give it a new something. Well, in this case, I want to give it the new create team view model. So now I have populated the active add team view with a new instance of create team view model. Next, I'm going to say items.add active add team view. Now, what's this? Well, this right here, this line, represents adding our instance of the user control to the items list. We used to have an active item where we just activated one item that got put into that active item property. But now, since we are a all active collection of conductor, we have a list of controls. Well, that list is called items. So whenever you add to the items list, you're adding to the list of controls that are active on this form. So I create a new view model and I put it into my property. Then I took that property value, and put it into items. Remember, since class instances aren't really copied, they're just pointers to the same location. That's a rough word for it. I use the term address sometimes, kind of like a street address, where they all point to that same location. Since they're the same location, just all pointing to it, when I say put that into the items, it's the same address, the same location. Therefore, both the active add team view property and the items list have the same location for that instance. And that's significant because we need to know which item in the list is the one we want for create team. Well, we don't really pull from the items list. We pull from this property, which represents one specific view that we're looking for. Now, let's try this out and see what happens. We select a team and add it, no problem. Now I hit create team instead, and we have the create team form. Now, just to make sure that it works, let's call it test team, and we'll add one person, let's say myself, add a member, create team. Nothing happens. Why does nothing happen? Well, we haven't wired up this button to actually create the team and to notify its parent that the team has been created, and we haven't wired up this form right here, the create tournament view model, to actually listen for the event and then take that and add it to the list. So we need to do all of that work, which isn't that hard. Let's start by closing this out, and I'll do a really quick refresher by going over to our create person view model. And here we have this event aggregation provider dot tracker event aggregator, and it says new person model, and then this dot try close. So let's just copy that so we have that template, and then let's come over to our create team view model. Now this form is already on the receiving end of events, like this right here for the person view model, but we come down here to create team, we have our to-do. So we have created a team, and we should probably see that test team if we start again. In fact, let's do that real quick, just to verify that actually was creating a team. Test team right there. So that works, but now we need to actually send back the team information and try to close. Well, we don't want a new person model. That's if we were saying that it's a blank person, if it's canceled. But we have the team model here, and it is a team model we want to pass through, not a person model. So we're passing through the created team. Perfect. Now it does raise one other issue, and that is if we come back over to our create person view, we add this cancel person button. We called it cancel creation. We should probably do the same thing for create team. So let's, above the can create team, create a public void cancel creation. Call the exact same thing, and then pass in a new team model. So again, the same pattern, cancel create, And then let's take this margin and we'll put it on the stack panel instead of on the button. And then we'll still have padding of 5 for each of our buttons. And then we'll also add the horizontal alignment of center. And over here we gave a spacing of 5 for the margin. So let's just do the same here. Margin equals, and this one we want the right hand side, so 5 like that. And then on this one, we can actually put a carriage of turn here to make it a little bit more readable. We want a margin of 5 on the left and 0 for the rest. There we go. So now we have cancel team. It's called cancel creation, so it's going to call the right method. We can test that in just a minute. And that should be all we need for this button. Let's just make our XAML a little prettier. There we go. So now cancel team should work, and it should notify that a team has been created. So just like in the team model, we have I handle person model. We want to come over to our create tournament and say that I handle team model. And I do control dot and say implement interface. Then you gotta find where it put that. That's right down here, the very bottom, handle team model message. And so again, we can check one of the properties. So if string.is null or white space, message dot team name, the team name has to be there. And we'll actually say if not null or white space. So put the exclamation point there. If not null or white space, then we'll take this message and add it to our list. So our list is called of selected teams. We were automatically selecting this person if we created them, or this team. Selected teams dot add message, which that's the team being passed in. Either way, we want to close out that view. So we come up here, let's find it real quick. We have our selected team is visible equals false, and the add team is visible equals true. We can copy this and paste it down here and flip these values. So selected team is visible as true, and available team visible equals false. That way, even if the team name is null or white space, meaning it was an empty model, which means they canceled. Even if they canceled, we're going to swap back to the selected team is visible. But especially if they've created a team and we're adding to the list. Let's just verify this real quick. We'll actually do a cancel first. So we'll say create team and go, oh, you know what? Let's fill in the name just to have it and hit cancel. And nothing seems to work. Do you know why? I do. So let's go over to here and notice we have this line right here where we subscribe to events. So if we have an I handle, we need to subscribe to events. It's very easily forgotten. I forgot it, but don't worry, we can go ahead and add it in to our constructor. There we go. We don't need to change anything because this refers to this instance. Therefore, it's always correct to say this. Let's try it again. This is why we test things a little bit at a time instead of trying to test at the end. Add or create team. And say test, cancel team. We're back where we started just to verify that actually does work the way we said it does. Cancel. uncanny losers are still there. Create team, if we said the best team and added, of course, Tim, and let's add Diane Foster as well. Hit create team. Now we have the best team with Tim and Diane. And if we removed, now the best team is in our available list because it has been created, but now it's up here because we said remove it. So this is all working properly. Now let's do it all over again for the prizes. So we can mirror the create prize button off of the create team button. So let's come down here to let's minimize the add team and set the create team. We'll take away the remove team for now. Now create prize. This will be very similar to this pattern here. So active add prize view equals new create prize view model. Items.add active add prize view. Selected prize is visible equals false, and add prize visible equals true. Now I keep mentioning it, but notice how this pattern allows me to say, well, create prize is very similar to create team, therefore I just follow the pattern. The only thing I change is where it says team, I do prize, and since my naming is consistent, they just line right up. So that's really easy to do. We've got create prize. Now what we should do is while we're here, let's handle the prize model. So comma, I handle prize model. We'll do control dot and enter to implement the interface. And then down here, we'll do something very similar to what we have right here. If not string.is null or white space, and I should have used the capital S. That's more the standard. Not a huge deal, but again, consistency. Message dot, let's do prize, let's do place name. You have to give it a place name. So if place name is not null or white space, meaning you've given it some sort of message to say that this is the place name, selected prizes.add message. But either way, selected prize is visible equals true, and add prize is visible equals false. So we should have handled that properly. Now let's go over to our prizes form and make sure we're actually passing through the information we need to. So let's go to our create prize view model. Come down here to create prize. We have our to-do. Well, our to-do here should be the same as what we did over here, where we called our event aggregation provider and passed in that T. In this case, we'll do the same thing, only pass in this case, model. And we should also add our cancel creation, public void cancel creation. And again, we do the same thing, but instead of passing in model or T, we say new prize model. That's all cancellation does. And then we have to go to our front end of our form and wire it up so that it actually has that button. So create prize. Again, we'll cut this and we'll add a stack panel. with the orientation of horizontal. We'll paste our button in, and then we will move the grid and column information over to our stack panel. And let's put some line returns in there. And then we'll also add our margin to our stack panel. And now we have a create prize button. Let's give it a margin. This one's going to have a margin on the right. So 0, 0, 5, 0. Padding is 10, which is different than the others, but I'm going to leave it alone for now. We'll see if I change my mind in a little bit. So this margin, we also have to have our horizontal alignment. I forgot that. Equals center. And then let's add one more button. And this is cancel prize. And cancel creation, and the margin switches. So it is 5 on the left. And we also change the background to red and the foreground to white, which we did not do on our team view. So let's change that so we're consistent. It's hard to be consistent, but it's good to do. All right, so now we have this wired up for cancellation, also for creating the prize, and it should pass the information back to our form, and the button should be wired for actually creating the prize. Let's see if all this works. Create prize, that worked. Cancel prize, that worked. Let's do it again. This time the place number is 1. We'll say the place name is first. The amount is $100. Create the prize. Nothing in the list. Now it does say remove prize. That's interesting, which means there actually is something in this list. It's just that whatever is being displayed doesn't have a valid text to display. In theory. Or maybe the remove prize is just wonky. One of the two. So it seems like this form works. So let's close that out. Let's close out the create team. That seems to work. Create team view model. We can close that out. Create tournament view model. That's where I want to look at what's going on with this message. So I'll put a breakpoint here, first of all. But then I also want to look at my XAML first before I do anything else. Let's swap this around again for this list. And it says the prize name is the display member path. Let's just make sure that we actually have a prize name. And it's called place name, not prize name. So let's grab place name and we'll paste it over here where we have our list. And we'll say run this again and see if that changes our list. Create place, we'll say place number 1, first place. The amount is 50. Create the prize. I put the breakpoint here, it stopped. If we look at our message, it does say that our ID is 14, it's first place, place number is 1, the prize amount is 50, it all sounds good. So it should be that our selected prize has 1 item in the list. So we should be good. So we can keep going on this. And in fact, it does say first place. I click this and hit remove. Nothing happens, but that's okay because we haven't wired up the remove button yet. And just to make sure things are working elsewhere, every once in a while I do that just to make all of this is working. All these buttons are working, the lists, everything. The only thing I'm not a big fan of is this right here and this right here. It's kind of a jumble when we're creating something because we have selections still available. We still have the buttons up here. We can even say remove prize. That just doesn't make sense. So let's just make this a little bit more aesthetically pleasing by saying that when we hit the create team, it removes everything except for the create team form. We hit create prize, it removes everything except for the create prize form. In fact, even the header where it says team section will now say create team. And the prize section will now say create prize. So it's like we're replacing this entire section. I think that'll work better. It'll also make better use of our vertical space. Now, horizontal space is more what we need to worry about right now because we're kind of stretching out here. But vertical space is also important. So let's just take that into consideration. Notice that we're actually need to pull down the screen a little bit in order to see the create tournament button. So let's work on our UI just a bit. Let's swap this back around. Now, let's start with our prizes. That seems a little bit easier. We have this stack panel here inside of this stack panel. There's a couple things we could do. We could either have two stack panels that both have this information, and they kind of sit on top of each other, which could work, but I'm not a huge fan of. Or we could wrap all of this stuff in its own stack panel, and then instead of having the name of this stack panel be selected prizes is visible, we could make the bigger one selected prizes is visible. So let's try that first. Stack panel orientation is vertical. And that shouldn't have changed anything. So now what we should do is just take this name and cut it out and paste it onto this stack panel. Let's see if this works for the prizes section. Create prize, and there's our create prize. Cancel, and now we have our prizes section back. The only thing I don't like is notice where the P starts, kind of like right here, and the create prize is a little lower. So I think we have some issues. So all of this right here down to our other stack panel is going to get cut out. We have a new stack panel with orientation of vertical. Now let's move our name up, and I want to talk about my way I do orientation. So there's our name. So now that should be everything we need except changing this margin to 0. So we move our name up here for a selected team is visible. So this whole section should be replaced. But if you notice, I always give the orientation specifically. I never say use a default. In fact, stack panel's default orientation is vertical, but I always specify. And the reason why is because wrap panel, the orientation by default is horizontal. And instead of saying, oh, which panel is this, and trying to remember all that trivia, I specify it. That way it's very, very clear to the next person which orientation this is in. You don't have to worry about it. And it's not causing any problems or slowing the application down or anything like that. It's just overriding the default value with essentially the same value. Remember, code is meant to be read by humans. Therefore, it should be very clear. Therefore, I always put the orientation and don't leave it up for the default. So now let's start this and make sure that this too works the way we expect it to, and it looks okay. False, we could just return this line right here. So say return there and put a semicolon at the end, because this Boolean right here returns a true or a false. But this is a little bit more clear as to what's happening, and it allows you to very easily put a breakpoint in the true and the false. And then you could pause here and evaluate the tournament name and the selected teams. So that makes it for a little bit easier debugging, and it's a little clearer, I think. It's up to you if you want to do it or not. So tournament name, let's look at that for a minute. Tournament name does not have a default value. So let's give it one. Remember that caused a problem earlier. And our selected teams does get initialized, so that's not a problem. But now we need to, for the can create tournament, we need to actually have a notify of property change on tournament name. That's not it. There we go. And the same thing on the selected teams. So now anytime either of those gets updated, we're going to check the can create tournament. Let's try that out, make sure it works. By default, it's blanked out. If I add a team, still nothing. If I add a name, now I can create a tournament. Let's remove a team, and it still says I can create a tournament. But if I change the tournament name, that's when it says, oh no, you can't after all. So it's not properly reading this list's change. It's not saying, oh, something changed in that list. So something's wrong here. Now, if we go over to our, let's wait for a minute. in our create team view model, we did something very, very similar. So let's come all the way down here to create team. In the can create team, we have if selected team members is not equal to null, then we do the check. So we did that because sometimes it's a null list. I don't think that's the issue, but we probably should mimic that. Let's find out. If selected teams is not equal to null, then return true or false. Else, return false. Let's try this and see if this works. I don't think it will, but it is good to have the same pattern because, yes, selected teams could be null. We'll start off with a team name, or tournament name, and I can add a team. That didn't work. Here's what we're going to do. Let's put our breakpoint right here in selected teams not equal to null, and then add a new team. Nothing. So selected teams is not alerting us when it's changing. Let's come up here to selected teams, the binomial collection, and can create tournament is being notified when there is a change. And I think we discovered the issue last time was this doesn't actually fire when one item gets added to the list, just when the entire collection gets updated. To try to see if this actually is the case, let's come down to the two places that we know where when a change gets made, it updates that list. The first one is when we actually create the team. So we say selected teams.add. Let's do a notify there. The other place is when we say up here, add team. Selected teams.add. We'll notify there as well. We'll also notify on the remove. Remove team, notify there. That's all the places where that list could be changed. Let's run again. We'll start with a tournament name. We'll add a team. We can create a tournament. Remove a team, we can't create a tournament. We add a team, we can create a tournament. Now, so far we're just doing count is greater than 0. Let's change that now so that it reflects the true nature of a team, which means we have to have more than one team, at least 2 teams. So let's try this again. We'll say test, add the uncanny losers, still nothing. Granimals, now we can create a tournament. So that's all we need to do for the can create tournament button. Now let's wire up the actual create tournament button. Well, we have the create tournament button in our WinForm application. If we hit F7 or double click on this button, it's actually easier. Double click takes us right to the method. Here's all the stuff that we do, which is actually quite a bit. So let's copy the whole thing, and then we will figure out what we need to do that's important and what isn't really important. So we'll copy this. We'll come over to our model in the create tournament. Let's actually minimize these other ones. And we'll paste this in. We don't need to worry about validating the decimal or trying to parse or saying it's not valid. We do need to create a new tournament model. The tournament name would be tournament name. The entry fee is the entry fee. the prizes is actually, I believe it's selected prizes. There we go. Selected prizes, but it's a binomial collection, so we have to say to list, and it is, I believe, again, selected teams to list. That wires up our matchups by creating the rounds, creates the tournament, alerts all the users, and now what it did was it created a new form, went to it, a new tournament form, the viewer form, and then showed it and closed this instance. For right now, what we'll do is we will do an alert that actually patterns after the create team view model. Let's go down here where we have one of our alerts. Well, I should copy both these lines. And here we'll say, instead of new team model, we'll say tournament model. And we'll close this. So we're alerting that we have a new tournament, and we're closing this instance of create tournament. So that should be all we need to do in our entire create tournament form. We're modeling ourselves exactly after the WinForm app, just changing slightly depending on the needs or the benefits of WPF. In this case, we don't have to check for decimal, and we don't have to alert the users about that kind of thing. We can just pull our information directly that we need, create the rounds, create the tournament, alert users to new rounds, and then we can just say, hey, here's the new tournament, and close. And then we'll handle that at the shell level. So let's actually handle this at the shell level. So the first we know we need to do is we need this subscribe event. So let's go ahead and grab that before we go over to our shell view model. And right in here, we will subscribe. And we're also going to say that we handle the tournament model. We'll do control dot. And so when this is called, it's right there. When this is called, we're going to close out. Let's just put it in comments here. Well, the create tournament's already going to close out. We just need to open the tournament viewer to the given tournament. How do we do that? Well, we don't have a tournament viewer yet, so we don't know. We'll get to that in the next lesson. The other thing I want to do while I'm here is I want to change this active item right here. Right now it's in the shell view model. I'm going to Control X to cut it out and paste it in create tournament. That's where it should live. So now when you click the create tournament button, it creates a new tournament view model and it opens it up. Now let's try our application. Now when we start, we have nothing over here on the right. Maybe we could change this by putting some kind of cool picture or otherwise making it look a little nicer. Or maybe we could even hide this part of the form entirely and make it a little tiny. But this is fine for now. Click the Create Tournament button, and there's our Create Tournament form. Once we fill it in, let's say test WPF tournament, and the entry fee is 10, and it will be, let's add a few teams. There's 4, 5, 6, 7 teams. And we'll create a prize just for first place. We'll call it first place. And the prize amount will be 50%. Create the prize. We'll create the tournament. and it says, hey, we're trying to send mail and we can't. Well, that's because I don't actually have my tool open, the paper cut tool I use to capture this email. So we can try doing that in a little bit once we have other things working. But it seems to be working so far. So I'm going to trust it's working to the extent we need it to. We can move on in the next lesson to the actual tournament viewer form and then make sure we do any debugging we need to do. And we'll also handle the idea of making this look a little bit better by putting some margins around the form to kind of give it some better depth and perspective and some space. So we'll start with the next lesson, which is handling the tournament viewer. And that's where we'll see the transition from creating tournament over to the actual viewing of the tournament.